as we begin. So, good afternoon. My name is Veronica Hirsch. I'm Chosonte. For my mother, I'm Chiricahua Apache. And I'm honored to serve as the Career Readiness and Employment Student Programs Administrator. And I'm joined by my colleague and my supervisor, Mr. Jack Soto. Jack, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Jack Soto. I'm Navajo and Kokopah. I am the Senior Program Manager for Career Readiness and Employment, and we work to support students and our tribal colleges and universities at career advising, employment, and any other things that we can be helpful to. And this is one of the resources that we have available. So feel free to ask any questions. I've created a poll. If you could fill it out, if you're capable, that would be awesome. And we'll take it from there. Thank you. Hello, Priscilla. Thank you for saying hi.
Thank you so much, Jack. And again, if you could please just go ahead and look at that poll. So you'll notice on the right side of your screen, you should probably see a chat feature and a poll feature. So go ahead and click on that poll feature and please feel free to submit a response. The responses are anonymous, so please feel free to be honest. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and begin. Just to let you know, we will be moderating the chat to the best of our ability. Oh, it says no poll yet. Thank you, Priscilla. Maybe we will troubleshoot that. So we're sorry for that. Well, we will work to make sure that poll is available for you. It's just a quick one. And so again, it pertains to this afternoon's session. As you see, the title is Professional Planning 101, Making the Most of Your Resume. And as Jack mentioned, within our career readiness and employment space, we offer a number of resources to students at any stage of your academic journey, as well as to people who are probably also on your professional journey. We know that many of our scholars not only have the reality of going to school, but probably also hold down a job, whether that's a part-time job or a full-time job. So wherever you're at in your academic and professional journey, we intend this information to hopefully be of use to you. And please feel free to comment in the chat. If you know of other resources that you think have been particularly helpful to you, that would be great if you feel comfortable providing those. If you have questions about any of the information we cover in this session, again, please feel free to use that chat feature. And thank you so much for our assistants, our tech assistant, who's mentioned if you don't see certain features, if you want to go ahead and refresh your browser, hopefully that should solve any issue. So with that, let's go ahead and begin. So really, the resume is the first entry point that people have to get to know who you are. And there are a few goals when creating a resume that's effective, whether that is for an employment vacancy for which you are applying, if it's for an internship opportunity, if you're submitting a resume for a scholarship or a fellowship. It's really intended to satisfy some of these goals. And there's others than those listed, but these are really the main ones. We want to make sure that your resume is authentic and that it engages your reader or your potential interviewer. Many studies have demonstrated that typically somebody who is reading your resume or potentially going to interview you, or that person might be the first level of, let's say, resume review. Does this person meet minimum qualifications? They'll probably glance at your resume for not too much longer than 6 seconds. So this idea of the 6-second resume test is not meant to scare or intimidate anyone of us, but rather it really helps us to think about what in that 6 seconds do I really want people to know about me? What do I think is important? And part of that is really thinking about how you want to show up, how you want to present yourself authentically and with integrity. And really this resume is part of your task of sharing your professional story. And along with that idea of sharing your professional story is demonstrating to that potential resume reader or interviewer how and why you are the perfect fit. I often joke, if any of you are familiar with Build-A-Bear, you can create, your ideal teddy bear. So if you can build a candidate, you think about that, how can you build yourself to demonstrate that you are the perfect fit for whatever that opportunity is, whether it's an opportunity for employment, an internship, a scholarship, or a fellowship. And so knowing that, it's important that we use our resume to highlight our skills and our achievements. This is not about overselling ourselves or exaggerating, but it is about honestly conveying what we are capable of doing, how our past experiences have appropriately equipped us, let's say, to take on the interesting and exciting challenges of this new job or this internship or this scholarship or fellowship. So it's important that we highlight our skills and our achievements. And of course, beyond scheduling an interview, the ultimate goal might be to be, let's say, offered a position of employment or offered that internship or scholarship or fellowship. But we're just going to get to the initial hurdle, the initial goal of with the resume, you've so impressed the person who's glanced at your resume for 6 seconds, your reader or your potential interview, that they say to themselves, I need to meet this person. I need to schedule an interview. If it's an online environment such as this, it could be Microsoft Teams, it could be a Google situation, it could be Zoom, it might even just be a telephone call, whatever the case may be. The resume, the goal is to help you secure a scheduled interview so that in that context, you can really wow the people that you are going to meet in that environment. So knowing that these are some of our goals, let's talk about some of the things that might be important to include on that resume, realizing we have that kind of 6-second resume test. So one of the first things to really ensure is accurate and appropriate is your contact information. And part of your contact information beyond your name, some people, especially if you are known in a professional way, let's say by a name other than your given name on your birth certificate, you might wish to include that. I would say if you generally go by nickname amongst friends and family, that is more so like an inside joke or inside nickname, probably don't put that. But your name. But if you are familiar going by maybe a shortened version of your name and use this in professional context, you might consider including that as well. Along with your name, your contact information as follows, it's important to ensure that you have a contact information of a professional nature. And by that I mean, as you see in this first bullet point, professional email address. Now for myself, I have an email address that I've used for over, probably at this point, maybe 17 years now. It's a Gmail address. It's kind of boring, I'll say. It is simply the initial of my first name, the initial of my second name, and my last name. So it's drhirsch@gmail.com. I don't mind sharing that with you. And that is an email that I consistently use. That's an email that follows me. So regardless of wherever I'm employed, regardless of whatever institution I've attended, that is a consistent professional email address I have chosen to use. So it's important to think about what is a consistent professional email address. Maybe one that differs from your current work address or your current school address if you're attending school. It could be the same, depending on that type of opportunity you're going for. Let's say for a fellowship or scholarship, something academically related. But if, let's say, you're between professional positions, you might consider using that type of professional email address. So along with that idea of creating a professional email address if you don't already have one, again, if you have an email address that might include a nickname or maybe even something a little risque, such and such at whatever, hotmail.com, you might consider just creating, I'm going to say in air quotes, a boring email address that maybe includes the initials of your first and middle name if you have one, your last name. Depending on, how many people share that name, you might have to add some letters or numbers or symbols afterwards. I think just because of my age and because I've had this email address forever, I'm simply just drhirsch@gmail.com. But again, it's important to think what type of professional email address you're going to include. And also, I want to encourage you, list a professional email address that you check frequently. So it doesn't do anyone good to list an email address that you only check maybe once a week or once a month. But having an email address, a professional email address that you check frequently, especially if you have different resumes or internship applications, scholarship applications, fellowship applications floating out into the universe, it's important to frequently check in. I would say at least once a day, just quickly check in to see if maybe you've gotten responses, hopefully the types of responses that you want to receive. It's also important to have a phone number where people can contact you. And so this I've even experienced recently where I know that I need to contact a scholar, and I know that the information listed in that scholar's profile is accurate. However, when I go to dial that scholar's telephone number, I receive a message like, this user has not set up a voicemail box. And I think, oh my gosh, I can't even contact this person in this way. So if you have a phone number, you have voicemail capabilities, it's important to set up a professional voicemail message. Again, that voicemail message indicating to whom the person can direct their message. You've reached Veronica Hirsch. I'm sorry I haven't been able to accept your call. Please leave your contact information and I will return your call at my earliest convenience. Something like that, something that makes sense to you. But again, maybe not some background music or background noise, or maybe not some slang that you want to include in your professional voicemail message, but something that just captures the information that whoever's contacting you needs to know, that they've in fact reached the proper person, the correct person. So please be sure to set up that professional voicemail message if you haven't already done so. And more, people are including the links to their LinkedIn profile. So if you haven't yet created a LinkedIn profile, or if you haven't updated it, I had to take my own advice earlier this morning and update my LinkedIn profile, which I'll actually include in the chat here in just a moment. But make sure that you think about what information you would want to include in a professional social media profile. Again, your professional persona might just differ from your personal persona, and that's totally fine. But you want to make sure that that professional persona is conveying the type of image or the type of message that you would feel confident discussing, let's say, in an interview context, and not embarrassed of like, oh my gosh, I wish I hadn't said that, or that wasn't available for public viewing. So think about the type of professional image that you would want to capture, let's say in your LinkedIn profile, that showcases your talents, your skills, and your abilities. Within that 6-second resume test, the potential reviewer or interviewer is probably going to know, why are you qualified? What makes you a good candidate? And maybe how have you effectively used your qualifications in previous job settings or previous academic settings? So you might want to devote 2 to 4 lines, not more than that. If you can be as concise as possible, that's always recommended. But you might want to give a little indication up front in that executive summary of why you're qualified, why you might even exceed qualifications. There might be certain minimum qualifications that with regard to educational attainment, certain type of degree, or professional work experience. So whatever the case may be, you might want to indicate why you're qualified for that, what makes you a good candidate, and how you can effectively use all the skills that you've amassed over the course of your academic and professional life to bring those to add to that particular organization, or to really enhance the goals and the objectives, let's say, that scholarship granting organization or institution, or that fellowship granting institution might have to offer, what they're trying to accomplish. You also want to list your education. You can list your degree. Your degree might be a degree in progress. And along with your degree, you might wish to include any awards, scholarships, or fellowships that relate to that degree. So for instance, I was very blessed to be offered a National Science Foundation Fellowship when I earned my professional science master's degree from the University of Idaho. And so that's something that I include within my list of educational accomplishments and degree attainments, to let people know that, yes, I earned this degree, and thankfully, and I'm so grateful to have had that particular distinction of being an NSF fellow. So that's something that you might want to include. Maybe you received a certain type of scholarship award, or whatever the case may be. So if that applies, make sure you list that. This is not the time to be overly modest. This is not the time to brag either, but it is the time to honestly talk about your accomplishments, what you've been able to achieve in your academic and professional journeys. You also, I highly recommend to include your professional skills. Now, this is really a matter of, I think, taste and preference. If you want to put a little section for professional skills after your education, or perhaps even before, underneath your executive summary, that's really at your discretion. But what I have chosen to do, and this was really inspired by a resume that I read a number of years ago from a woman who I think did an excellent job of really showcasing her talents. She had a specific section that would provide the number of years, let's say, of skill or expertise she had in a particular required skill for that particular job position. So for instance, if I'm going for a job that requires, let's say, a certain amount of public speaking, I might include the number of years I have, let's say, related to public speaking. I might also include, depending on what skill or talent I'm highlighting, the expertise level I have in something. So I provided some examples below for you. So I might say I have 3 years of public speaking experiences to audiences of 20 plus people. That might, address a question, let's say in that job announcement that says you have to have a minimum number of years of public speaking experience. So I've already, let's say, satisfied that. I've checked that off the list. And I'm not expecting my potential resume reader or potential interviewer to go through and add up the number of years of my experience. I've done that math for them. I'm trying to make it as easy and accessible as possible for that person to realize I'm their ideal candidate. I am the perfect fit for, let's say, that particular job or internship, scholarship, or fellowship. Along with that is you'll notice, an audience can be, at least if there's more than one person, it's not just me speaking to myself, let's say in a mirror, but an audience could be 2 or it could be 200. So let's say, depending on what that audience is, and again, I want to be honest. I always encourage people, you want to include things on your resume that you feel that you could say with a straight face. Not something that you're overselling, also something that you're not underselling. So let's say if I have 10 years of public speaking experience to audiences of 2,000 plus people. Again, it's still public speaking experience, but I'm demonstrating that maybe I have a little bit more expertise, a little more familiarity. It also would demonstrate, there's a difference between an audience of 20 and an audience of 2,000. So I'm demonstrating maybe I have that confidence, to go from, let's say, starting out at an audience of 20, maybe working up to an audience of 2,000. If it's possible for you to attach those types of numbers that demonstrate, let's say, that type of value, value in air quotes, that's also very helpful for your potential resume reader or potential interviewer. Another example, 4 years of intermediate level Microsoft Office software expertise. Again, I'm demonstrating, how many years of experience I have in this. Again, I'll only include that if it specifically pertains to that job description or that internship description, that scholarship or that fellowship minimum requirements. But I'm also being honest about where my expertise levels lie. If I'm not, feeling that I can go backwards and forwards in a particular, let's say, software application, I'm not going to oversell that. But if I know that I'm beyond just the basics, beyond the beginner, I'm going to say I'm at the intermediate level. And I'm saying in like what specific type of software. You might have a very unique or industry-specific type of software expertise. You might be able to say, I have 4+ years of advanced level expertise in Python, which is a coding language. So whatever the case may be, it's very helpful, again, to give that maybe that number of years of expertise, that level, if you're a beginner, if you're an intermediate or advanced, and maybe the specific name of that type of software. Again, if it specifically pertains to that job description, the internship description, that scholarship, or that fellowship language. And moving on to that, the other aspect, the other goal of the resume, beyond that type of 6-second resume test, where we really want to capture the attention and the interest of our potential resume reader, our potential interviewer, this is really an opportunity for you to share your professional story. And so part of that professional story is really first taking a moment to think about what your core values are. What are those values for you? And I know we don't have a poll about that, but I just want to offer that as maybe a question upon which you can reflect in your own time. If you want to even indicate in the chat what your core values are, that would be great too. But the reason I mention that is it's important to think about your core values and to also find out a little bit about, let's say, the company or organization or the scholarship granting entity or the institution that's offering a fellowship. It's important to find out what their core values are as well. That way you can see where your personal core values and the core values of, let's say, a prospective employer or an organization to which you're submitting a scholarship or fellowship application. You want to see where those values align, where they overlap. And the reason I mention that is, again, we're talking about that idea of the resume demonstrating that you are an ideal candidate, that you are the perfect fit. Now, in the course of thinking about your core values and maybe reading up, looking at the website of an organization is very, very helpful for that. Usually there's a drop down that says something about us, about our history, our mission statement, our vision statement, something. That information is likely going to discuss and describe the core values of that particular organization or that particular institution. It's important to see if that's going to be a good fit for you. And I know sometimes, we focus on, well, am I going to be a good fit for the organization? It goes both ways. Is that organization, is that prospective employer, is that institution going to be a good fit for you? because ideally you only want to submit a resume to an organization or prospective employer or an institution that you really feel that there's going to be value added, that you're not only going to contribute value to that organization or institution, but that it's a two-way street, that there's reciprocity involved. It's not just a one-way direction. So that that organization is also going to be able to pour into you as you think about what your goals are in the short term and long term. So when you're thinking about your core values, when you're thinking about how they align with that particular organization or institution, it's also helpful once you've done that process to explain the scope and scale of your professional goals. Now, your professional goals may differ from somebody else's, somebody who's maybe even applying for the same position as a job or the same type of internship opportunity, scholarship or fellowship. This is really about you showing up with honesty and integrity and being intentional about what you think the scope and scale of your professional goals are. And also to realize that the scope and scale of your professional goals can change over time, which is why it's so important that we ensure that we have updated resumes, because my resume from last year differs from my current resume, just now here in June of 2023. So that's also an important thing to think about, as your professional story unfolds and develops, as you consider and reconsider your core values, how those align with a prospective employer or organization, and how that influences your scope and scale of your professional goals. Now, within that, if you happen to have any gaps, let's say, in terms of meeting certain minimum requirements of work experience or certain, let's say, knowledge, maybe industry specific knowledge, it's important to explain any gaps that you might have and what you are proactively doing to address those gaps. So, for instance, I have chosen at times to apply for positions where I didn't technically meet the minimum number of, let's say, years of work experience in an area. Now, for myself, this is just my preference. If I didn't meet that criterion, let's say by less than a year. So, for instance, let's say it said 5 years of experience doing budget forecasting. And let's say I honestly have added it up. I did the math. I didn't expect my resume reviewer or potential interviewer to do it for me. And I realized, oh my gosh, I have like 4 years and 8 months. So not quite five, I'm being honest, but pretty close. In my experience, I've chosen to still apply for positions of that nature, but I'm honest about that, and I will say, while I don't yet have the full 5 years, let's say, of budget forecasting experience, I might explain what I'm proactively doing to get that experience. If I'm attending professional conferences, if I've enrolled for any type of online series or sessions or courses, whatever the case may be. I'm being honest about where my expertise and my experience level is at currently. And again, if I've fallen a little short, let's say I have 4 years and 8 months versus, a full solid 5 years, I can be very honest and address that, and hopefully that will also be something that a potential resume reader or interviewer thinks like, it's pretty close. She's already doing other stuff to be proactively, get that type of 5 year benchmark of experience. I'm still going to put her in the pile of resumes of potential interview candidates to be considered. And that's also very helpful. Again, I leave that at your discretion, realizing that however we portray ourselves, the professional image or professional persona that we want to convey on our resume, that it does feel that it's very honest, again, that I can say it with a straight face, that I know that I'm including information that is accurate and that I'm behaving with integrity, and that I'm also being proactive about increasing my skills, my talents in a particular area, especially if that's a job that I know that I really could do and I could really contribute and be beneficial, let's say, to that organization or be the ideal candidate for that scholarship or fellowship. And thank you, Jack. Jack was mentioning in the chat, there are absolutely many free and accessible training programs that are offered online. You can find these very often through different professional associations, through various businesses. So, if you feel that you don't yet have a certain talent or skill, but you've always wanted to have it, this is also the time, before you even construct a resume or after you do it, you say, wow, there's a gap. I'm going to be proactive about finding out what resources are available to me so that I can make sure that I am the most competitive candidate when I go for a particular, say, job or internship, scholarship, or fellowship. The other thing that we want to ensure that we're able to do in our resumes is to highlight our skills and achievements. And very often I encourage people to think about what they've done and to maybe add, demonstrate, I'm going to put in air quotes, the value of that particular work. So if you can, if it makes sense to maybe include some numbers or percentage to demonstrate the value added to your work, that can be really powerful. And so this first example that you see, interface with 200 plus customers with 99% order accuracy in a typical 4-hour shift. That is something that language, that verbiage is something that myself working with a client of mine, a young client who was still in high school and entering a community college setting, they had shared with me, like, I've only worked in food service settings, and specifically in settings that are offer a drive-through. And so I listened to that person. I said, okay, well, let's talk about that. So I see on your resume, you've worked at this particular in a food service context, and as you put it, you've only worked in drive-through. But let's talk about, how many typically, what is your shift? Oh, my typical shift is about 4 hours long. Okay, typically, how many people, how many orders do you take? Well, at least 200. That's on a slow day. I'm like, okay, so 200 plus would be accurate. Oh yeah, absolutely. How often do you get people complaining that you messed up their order? Hardly ever. Okay, so hardly ever is like 99.99999 whatever. Exactly. I said, well, so then let's not minimize what you can do and what you have done. In fact, you are the public face for up to 200 people, over 200 people, in a 4-hour time frame, and you are highly accurate. You're dealing with people who are hangry in a drive-through. That's serious business. You are interfacing with the public. You are ensuring that there is appropriate customer service. You are really maybe the deciding factor whether that person is ever going to buy from that particular place ever again, based upon you. No pressure. And so I think really talking with that person came to realize, like, wait, I have so many more skills and talents than maybe I initially gave myself credit for. And this is not about overselling, but this is about being very intentional and also being appreciative of the skills that you do have. So if you ever need people to remind you, of how talented you are, contact us. But really, also think about discussing with a friend, somebody that you trust. Very often we forget maybe even some of our own skills and achievements. That can also be helpful to think about, how would I demonstrate or how would I explain that maybe I am a really efficient person, that I am really detail oriented, that I really do care about accuracy. You might think again how you might relate numbers and percentages, again, if they make sense to the work that you've done. And you see this other example that I included here as well. The other thing I also encourage people to do is to list their first and their best that relate, let's say, to the particular job that you held, that might even hopefully relate to the job, let's say, or internship that you're seeking, or that might demonstrate to the scholarship or fellowship reviewers who are reviewing your application that, wow, you really are the type of person who fulfills, their ideal candidate or their ideal scholar or fellow. So listing your first and best that relate, here's one example. I worked with one scholar at their particular institution, and this person had expressed to me like, well, I haven't done too many firsts, but I did help create like a student organization. So, well, tell me about it. Well, we never had one that was LGBTQIA Two-Spirit Plus focused, but we did it. Well, okay, tell me more about it. Well, it wasn't just me, I was with others. I was like, okay, so you co-created something, yes. And about how many people were part of that? Well, people who identified as LGBTQIA Two-Spirit Plus and allies, about 50. So I said, so that is significant. That was amazing. So again, that's where that example of co-created first LGBTQIA Two-Spirit Plus 50-member student organization came about. That this was a first. This was really noteworthy. This was really powerful and impactful. And that there were this number of students. Now, it doesn't have to be 50 members. It could have been 10. But in this person's case, it was that significant number with people identifying as being part of that community along with allies. So I thought, well, that's really great. And we want to make sure that we can capture how impactful and how impressive that is. And then you see this other example, promoted to a supervisory role for 3 staff within 9 months of being hired. So in this case, this individual was looking to continue to move up within a specific organization. And this person was demonstrating, like, you've already trusted me enough. I was only 9 months on the job, and you promoted me from, reporting to others to having some people report to me. So clearly, I am a person that you believe can grow with the organization. So that's, again, an example of that type of best situation that I mentioned. And I'm going to take a little pause here. Thank you so much, Jack, for monitoring the chat. And as Jack has asked, are there any specific resume questions that anyone has at this point? I have just a couple more slides, but I don't want to get carried away and maybe overlook addressing a question that anyone may have. So I'm just going to take a few seconds. I'm going to take a sip of water. If you have any questions, if you can go ahead and type them in the chat.
I was looking at the poll. I know that there's one person at least that doesn't have resume, and I saw that a couple were updating. So I don't know if you have any questions about your updates. I know that some of the things that we often brush over is how do I transition from applying to middle management roles to leadership roles. Those are different words and different ways to consider. We did have a question in the last session where one person had, 3 or 4 different or multiple roles within one organization. And the way that I shared was that, over the years, I've had many roles within a specific. So I would highlight just the company, and then I would go through, and then you could do it 2 ways. One, you could list every position you have underneath that, and then list some of the highlighted skills that you demonstrated in those positions, or you could go through and list intern, community associate, program lead, and then director, and then go through and then highlight what you felt were the 2 or 3 main positions. Again, you want to talk more in your professional summary at the beginning to highlight the things that you think are going to be most critical, because as Veronica said, you literally only have 3 to 5 seconds to really woo and attract someone to think you a credible candidate. So just to remember some of that stuff. And I wanted to pull at least that one example of multiple positions within one business space.
Thank you for that, Jack. Okay, I'm going to go on. Just have a couple more slides remaining, I should say. And as I said, the initial, I'm going to say end goal, just of the resume. We know that there's more stuff beyond the interview. But now we've wowed the person within the first 6 seconds of looking at our resume, seeing our executive summary, maybe even including within the executive summary one of my core values, demonstrating how that aligns with that organization and how that relates to some of my past accomplishments. I mean, that would be phenomenal. And so now I'm at the point where my resume reader, my potential interviewer says, we've got to meet this person. They seem like a great candidate. Let's see what happens. And so now we're at that point where the interview is being scheduled. And so within that, these are other important things to think about, questions you might be asked, questions to consider before entering that interview environment. That interview might be an in-person interview. It might be in a virtual space, something like this. It might be on Zoom, Microsoft Teams. It might be on Google, any number of platforms. It's actually very important to find out from that potential interviewer, what is the preferred platform? And to think about, do I have a machine that has that capability? Do I have adequate, let's say, internet speed if this is going to be a virtual interview? Do I have that particular, let's say, updated Zoom software or Teams software downloaded onto my machine? That's something I want to make sure and I troubleshoot beforehand. Funnily enough, in the previous session of this discussion about resumes and making the most of your resume, we had some tech issues. And sometimes that happens, and it does. And so it's important to think about, what if in that situation, how would I pivot from it? I can maybe cry later, but in the moment, how do I have that brave face? How do I have my backup plan? How do I make sure that maybe I'm not too flustered? I might even discuss with the interview in advance. Let's say if I'm in an area that doesn't always have the best interview connectivity, I might consider, are there alternate spaces for me to go to make sure that, my audio and my video, let's say, is properly working if I'm having that interview in a virtual environment. If it's simply not possible and I just got to make do with what I got to make do, I might even be very honest with my potential interviewer and say, you know what, my internet right now, I am a little bit concerned about connectivity issues. Would it be possible for us to schedule a telephone interview? And it's okay. If there are those concerns or certain types of limitations, it's okay to convey that in advance. And it's okay to do that in a way that makes you feel like you're in control of the situation and not working from a deficit. So if any of those things happen, please don't feel shy or ashamed to the point where you just think, I hope it works out, because we can hope and dream, but we want to make sure that we have, the parameters that are in place that can support us to have a really positive interview experience. So now let's say we set up that positive interview environment, we're ready to go. And so within that context, we can continue to refer to our resume. I encourage people to either have a hard copy or if it's pulled up on your computer screen, your own resume that you can refer to. We might think, oh, I know my resume. I'm the one who wrote it. Of course I'll remember that stuff. But you might be asked a specific question where you don't want to feel that you're going to freeze in the moment. So if you have access to a copy of it, whether it's a hard copy or on a computer screen, you can relate maybe even how your present goals and your current work focus, any recent accomplishments that hopefully are also included on your resume, how those relate to the position and how you can rely upon those experiences to help you answer any questions that are fielded to you for you to say, explain, I noticed that you have listed this particular experience on your resume. Can you share more about that? And how might that relate to this current role, this current job, or this internship for which you're applying, or how that might relate to this scholarship or this fellowship for which you submitted an application. If, though, you have a situation where there's been a little bit of time between when you submitted a resume for review and when you've actually scheduled that interview, maybe you've just been awarded, I don't know, Employee of the Month. Feel free to mention that if that hasn't yet made it on your resume. Again, we want to make sure that the resume we submit is as accurate and as current as possible. But if there has been a little bit of lag time between when you submitted that resume for that particular job, internship, scholarship, or fellowship, and when you've actually had the interview, and something positive has come up in between that time, please do be sure to mention that within that interview setting. It's also important to think about how your past work accomplishments have set you up to be successful in whatever role you're applying for. Whether that role is some type of employment, whether that's part-time or full-time, whether that's an internship experience, a scholarship, or fellowship, to reflect upon, let's say, lessons learned, additional knowledge gained, and whatever that might look like. Maybe you've had additional firsts and bests from that previous slide in past work accomplishments that you feel can properly inform you to set you up to be successful and to help, let's say, that organization reach their goals, their objectives. It's important to think about how those things can prepare you for that new level of responsibility, that new level of opportunity and success. And lastly, to think about how your future goals will help align, how they do align, and how can they help promote the goals, let's say, of a future employer, whether that's full-time employment, an internship, or let's say a scholarship or fellowship granting organization. How do those things go together? That can be very helpful to include and to mention when you're thinking about items that you want to discuss in an interview context. I think I just have one more slide, and this is how to contact us. So if you have any questions about anything that has been mentioned in this presentation, I do want to encourage you to reach out to us. And with that, I'm going to say, thank you. And if there are any questions, please feel free to mention those in the chat. Jack, anything that you would like to add as well that maybe I just glossed over, please feel free to share that now.
No, I just want to say thank you all for joining us today, and we appreciate your time and energy in being a part of this summer conference. And if you have any feedback, by all means, I know there'll be a survey, so please feel free to let us know what was helpful and what was not, and then we'll go from there to sort of adjust our lens and our presentation. But it's great to see many of you here. I know a few of you, and we're looking forward to tomorrow. Join us tomorrow. I know that we have a presentation. I'll be walking through some future planning for just a professional perspective. And then Veronica will be walking through our 6R framework for the faculty and staff and other people who are at the on the other side of the student position. So thank you all for joining today.